My job is preventing catastrophic failure. I babysit a 20,000-ton steel heart that powers this floating city, a world of unforgiving physics and honest machines. Too bad my wife Karen operated on a completely different, much messier system. For 8 years, I thought our marriage was a well-oiled machine. It wasn't. It was just a long, slow oil leak I was too busy to notice. She loved the free cruises that came with my job. While I was down in the rumbling gut of the ship, keeping the lights on, she was living the high life on the Lido deck. This time, I caught a break, a surprise evening off. I headed to our stateroom, picturing a quiet night, a rare moment of calm. I remember the smell in the hallway, that chemical lemon scent, meant to feel clean but just smells like organized chaos. The door to our cabin was just another door in a long, identical row. A perfect, anonymous place for a life to fall apart. I swiped the keycard. I didn't get a surprise party. I got a cliché. There he was, a guy fumbling with his shorts, and there was Karen pulling a sheet up to her chin with a gasp that was almost comical. The guy, Marco, was the director of guest experiences, according to the name tag he'd carelessly dropped. What an experience! On the nightstand sat a bottle of cheap champagne, the complimentary kind. I knew for a fact it only came with the suite upgrades, and we, my friend, were not in a suite. How's that for a quiet detail? Her excuse was as cheap as the champagne. I was so lonely, Jeff. Right. I didn't raise my voice. The thrum of the engines in my head was all the noise I needed. I walked to the ship's pathetic excuse for a business center, paid an insane fee for satellite Wi-Fi, and emailed my lawyer. File it. 2 words to end 8 years. The real bummer? My contract isn't up for another 2 months. I'm legally chained to this glittering prison, powering the very vacation that ruined my life. The last week has been a greasy fog of depression. I even tried one of those Zoom therapy sessions. Felt like talking to a well-meaning robot. But last night, I started packing Karen's things. Tucked in her wallet, I found it. A printed email from Marco, dated a week before we even sailed. An offer to upgrade her to a junior suite. Her reply was sickeningly cheerful. Can't wait to thank you properly. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a premeditated transaction. She traded 8 years of marriage for a bigger cabin. In that instant, the grief evaporated, replaced by something cold and sharp. I checked the crew manifest. Marco is on board for the entire season. So am I. Suddenly, 2 months doesn't seem like a sentence. It feels like an itinerary. Every machine has a pressure gauge, a point of weakness where stress becomes visible. In the engine room, I monitor hundreds of them. Down here, you learn that things rarely explode without warning. They hiss first. They strain. They show you the cracks before they break. People? They're the same. They just hide their gauges better. Marco's gauge, I decided, was his ambition, and I had just been given a front-row seat to watch the needle flicker. My first move wasn't dramatic. Revenge, like good engineering, requires a schematic. I spent an afternoon in the ship's crew-only computer lab, a sad, windowless room that smelled of dust and desperation. Using my login, I accessed the company internet, a digital world far from the tourist-facing charade. And there he was, Marco, a 5-year veteran with a file thicker than a dictionary. His professional headshot was all bleached teeth and curated sincerity. He was the cruise line's golden boy. But then I found the real treasure. It was a memo from corporate headquarters. Marco wasn't just the director of guest experiences on this rust bucket. He was a finalist for vice president of the entire cruise line's shore excursion division. A massive promotion, a cushy corner office in Miami with a 6-figure salary.
Suddenly, everything clicked into place. His generosity with the suite upgrade for Karen wasn't a sloppy seduction. It was networking. A calculated investment. What better way to impress the upper hires than by getting glowing reviews from the wives of senior officers? I wasn't just cheated on, I was an unwitting part of his corporate ladder climb. He hadn't just goofed with my wife, he'd used my life as a resume builder. A wave of something that felt dangerously like amusement washed over me. Getting him fired would be like putting out a small grease fire. The real prize was burning the whole kitchen down. How do you ruin a man who lives on charm? You don't attack the man, you attack the performance. That night, Marco was hosting the week's main event, the Captain's Platinum Circle Cocktail Party, a schmooze fest for the highest-paying guests. It was his Super Bowl, his audition tape for the VP gig. From my control panel deep in the ship, I can see the energy load distribution for every single zone. I saw the aft Vista Lounge, where the party was being held, start to draw more power for lights and sound systems. A lovely detail, I also knew that the air conditioning in that specific lounge had a quirky, sensitive relay. It tended to trip if the primary power conduits experienced even a minor, momentary fluctuation. It's the kind of thing you'd never notice unless you spent your life staring at these diagrams. A little recalibration of an energy converter was all it took. A few keystrokes? Completely routine. Utterly untraceable. It wouldn't break anything. It would just make a very important room filled with very important people very, very warm. The first hiss from the pressure valve. Let's see how well your charm holds up when you're sweating through your tailored blazer, Marco. A minor temperature variance of 8 degrees doesn't trigger a ship-wide alarm. It doesn't even warrant an official log entry. All it triggers is a small blinking yellow light on my diagnostic panel. A light only I would understand. It was the most satisfying thing I'd seen in weeks. Up on the party deck, Marco's perfectly chilled champagne would be warming up. The ice melting. The well-heeled guests fanning themselves with cocktail napkins. I pictured him, his smile fixed but his eyes darting around looking for someone to blame for the sudden, oppressive humidity. He thought he was the master of the guest experience, but he forgot one thing. I control the ship's central nervous system. A minor tweak to the environment, and the carefully constructed illusion begins to sweat. A good test. My next step required more finesse. The AC stunt was cute, but it was just a prank. Child's play. To dismantle a career, you need leverage. Real leverage. I spent my off hours digging into the shore excursion business he was so desperate to lead. On the surface, it was all pristine catamarans and certified tour guides. But beneath the glossy marketing brochures lies a world of third-party contracts, liability waivers, and whispered handshake deals in dusty port offices. A real mess. And Marco's signature was on all of it. He wasn't just managing tours, he was managing risk. Or, more accurately, sweeping it under the rug. The gold was buried in the financial reports for the exclusive ATV tour in Cozumel, his flagship moneymaker. I cross-referenced the maintenance invoices for the ATVs with the passenger incident reports. The pattern was subtle but undeniable. For the past 6 months, the number of minor mechanical failures, a loose brake cable here, a soft tire there, had ticked steadily upward. At the same time, the budget allocated for vehicle maintenance and replacement parts had been systematically trimmed, reallocated to marketing and vendor relations. He was cooking the books. Not enough to get him arrested, but enough to create a seriously risky situation.
He was rolling the dice with guest safety to make his profit margins look better for corporate. A true bummer for whoever's brakes failed next. A beautiful opportunity for me. Then came the unexpected plot twist. My little AC trick had an unforeseen ripple effect. The captain of the ship,
an old-school Norwegian with eyes that could rust steel, cornered me in the mess hall. He didn't mention the party. He just looked at me over his coffee and said, "Jeff, there are rumors. Corporate is watching Mr. Castile's performance on this sailing very closely. They want a smooth run. We all do. Ensure your systems remain predictable." He wasn't accusing me. He was warning me. They weren't just watching Marco. They were watching the whole ship. I was no longer an invisible ghost in the machine. I was on the radar. Playing with the ship's systems was now a much bigger gamble. But as I sat there, the ship's vibration humming through the floor, a new path forward became chillingly clear. He wanted me to be predictable? Fine, my systems would be flawless. But that didn't mean I couldn't slip a new piece of data into the equation. The ATV tour reports weren't just numbers. They were a story waiting to be told. The next port of call is Cozumel. The captain's warning shot hadn't scared me off. It just gave me a new target. I don't need to mess with the ship anymore. I just need to make sure the right person takes a closer look at Marco's own broken machine. And I think I know just the person to send the anonymous tip. After all, what's the point of a well-oiled machine if you can't get it to run someone over? Metaphorically speaking, of course. The best part of being a ghost is that no one ever sees you coming. Down in the engine room, I'm basically a phantom, a name on a duty roster, a voice on a radio. It's a useful kind of invisibility. Now, I just had to learn how to weaponize it. As the ship's massive hull groaned and nudged its way into the dock at Cozumel, the guests above saw a colorful paradise. I saw a network with one glaring vulnerability: its reliance on outside vendors, Marco's kingdom. I had the schematics to his little ATV operation right here on a memory stick in my pocket. But how do you fire a missile from the shadows and make sure no one sees the smoke trail leading back to you? The plan was simple: get the damning report into the right hands. At corporate. Not to Marco's boss. He'd likely just bury it to protect his golden boy. No, I needed someone in the safety and compliance department. Their entire job is to overreact. They're the professional pessimists, the ones who see a lawsuit in every paper cut. An anonymous email detailing potential guest endangerment due to faulty equipment would be like blood in the water for a shark. But sending it from the ship's network was out. After the captain's little chat, I figured my digital footsteps were being watched. Using a shoreside internet cafe felt sloppy, too much of a wild card, too much risk. I spent the morning watching people. The chaos of disembarkation is a beautiful thing. It's a river of humanity, a perfect place for an observer to go unnoticed. I watched Marco, dapper in a linen shirt, glad handing the VIPs as they headed off for his exclusive and dangerously cheaped-out ATV adventure. He was radiating confidence, a man convinced of his own brilliance. It's amazing how easily people mistake luck for skill. But then I saw my solution. Her name was Brenda. I didn't know her name then, of course. She was just a face I'd seen before. A solo traveler in her late 50s with a permanent expression of mild disappointment. She was always in the ship's library, ignoring the bingo tournaments, reading dense-looking historical novels. She looked meticulous, careful, and more than a little bit bored. She was my clean terminal, my human firewall. I couldn't send the email myself, but what if a concerned fellow guest did?
Someone who just happened to overhear a troubling conversation between two crew members. It was perfect. I could write the script, load the weapon, and hand it to someone else to pull the trigger. Brenda wasn't getting off the ship today. I saw her settle into her usual chair in the library, a quiet sanctuary from the forced fun, A room whose Wi-Fi signal was surprisingly strong. A little pocket of opportunity. My mind raced, constructing the narrative I'd sell her. The worried look I'd practice in the mirror. The precise, alarming details I would reluctantly share. So I put the plan in motion. I went to a crew-only terminal, drafted the perfect email to the safety VP, concise, professional, filled with just enough technical jargon from the ATV reports to sound credible. I saved it as a text file onto a clean, untraceable USB stick. All the data was there. All the danger spelled out. All Brenda had to do was copy, paste, and hit send from her own personal device. She'd be the concerned citizen, I be a ghost. I walked out of the library, circled around, and then re-entered, this time with a furrowed brow and a well-rehearsed look of civic duty. I took a deep breath. Showtime! "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady. "I don't mean to bother you, but I couldn't help but overhear something, and frankly, I'm not sure what to do." Her name was Brenda, and she looked up from her thick novel with an expression of profound irritation. The look of a person whose fortress of solitude has just been breached. Perfect. Annoyance is a much better starting point than suspicion. "Yes?" she asked, her voice dry as old paper. The library was my stage. The quiet hum of the ship, the scent of aged books and wood polish. It was all part of the set dressing for my little performance. I leaned in, channeling my inner concerned citizen, pitching my voice just low enough to imply confidentiality. "I am so sorry to bother you," I began, letting a bit of manufactured panic into my tone. "I'm part of the crew, engineering, and I overheard something. A couple of the deckhands were talking about the ATV excursion, about the brakes being unreliable." I laid it on thick, but not too thick. The story was polished. I was worried, felt powerless to go through official channels because this Marco guy runs the whole show, and I thought, gee, maybe a guest, a concerned, upstanding citizen, might get a better response from the head office. I presented myself as a simple cog in the machine, a man who just wants to do the right thing. It felt like walking a tightrope. One wrong word, and her disinterest could curdle into disbelief. I watched her face, looking for the telltale flicker of sympathy. She just listened, her expression unreadable, her fingers resting on the cover of her book as if guarding it. When she finished my tale of woe, she didn't offer the flustered sympathy I expected. Instead, a slight, humorless smile touched her lips. "Marco Castillo," she said. It wasn't a question. "The man with the smile that looks like it was bought on credit? Tell me, Mr. Engineer, what did Marco do to you?" My blood ran cold. The engineer in my head screamed, "Abort! Abort!" I had miscalculated. This wasn't a bored tourist. This was a tactical missile in a floral blouse. I started to stammer out a denial, but she held up her hand. "Save it. My late husband worked 40 years for a company that put him out to pasture 3 months before he got his full pension. The guy who signed the papers looked a lot like your Mr. Castillo. The world is full of them. Slick, ambitious men who'd burn down a village to warm their hands." What could I say to that? I'd come looking for a pawn and found a queen. She wasn't bored. She was simmering. Years of it. So I abandoned the act. I just slid the small black USB stick across the polished table between us. It felt surprisingly heavy, like a loaded die. A tiny repository of data that could detonate a career.
It's all on there, I said, my voice now back to its normal, tired self. Maintenance logs, incident reports. It's not a good look. She picked it up and examined it not as a piece of tech, but as if weighing an abstract concept of justice in her palm. The air around us felt charged, a tiny bubble of conspiracy in the quietest room on the ship. Brenda stood up, tucking the USB stick into her purse with a decisive snap. The move was so final, so certain, it caught me off guard. My simple, contained plan had just been outsourced, and my new contractor was a wild card. "You don't worry about this," she said, looking me straight in the eye with an intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. "I know exactly who this needs to go to, and I have a particular flair for writing letters of complaint. They won't just read it, they'll feel it." With that, she walked away, leaving me standing there between the shelves of historical fiction, feeling like I just handed a lit firecracker to a pyromaniac. I'd gotten what I wanted, but the control, my precious calculated control, had just sailed out the porthole. Now what the heck had I just unleashed? For the next 48 hours, the only sound was the familiar, deep-chested hum of the engines, and my own thoughts running in a frantic, paranoid loop. I had handed off my perfectly calibrated weapon to a complete stranger, a woman whose only known quality was a simmering resentment for corporate slickness. It was like writing a brilliant piece of code and then letting a kid with a juice box bang on the keyboard. What had Brenda written in that email? Had she been surgical, as I intended, or had she gone on a wild, rambling tirade that would be instantly dismissed as spam from a cranky tourist? The lack of intel was eating me alive. Every time a message chimed on the internal comms, I jumped. Meanwhile, life on the floating city went on. The ship sailed from Cozumel, its wake a white scar on the blue water. Up on deck, another day of margaritas and bad karaoke unfolded. I watched Marco from a distance. He was still the master of his domain, oozing confidence. He hosted a poolside Latin dance fiesta, complete with a ridiculously overpriced tequila tasting. He didn't have a care in the world. Maybe nothing had happened. Maybe Brenda had just tossed the USB stick in a trash can, deciding revenge wasn't worth interrupting her reading time. The thought was infuriating. I was stuck in a self-made purgatory of suspense, refreshing my own bare-bones inbox for news that would never come to me directly. Then, the first tremor. It came not with a bang, but with a quiet, almost invisible shift in the ship's social tectonics. I was in the crew mess, grabbing a late-night coffee. Two officers were at the next table talking in hushed tones. I caught only snippets. About Cozumel vendor, email from Miami. My ears perked up. They mentioned Marco's name. They weren't panicking, just gossiping. The email had landed. Brenda, my unpredictable agent of chaos, had delivered. She'd managed to hit the target without blowing up the launch pad. The pressure gauge needle had officially begun to move. The next day, the real fun began. Marco was scheduled to host his big Behind the Scenes, a journey into ship operations tour for the VIP guests. It was one of his pet projects, designed to make him look integral to every part of the ship. The grand finale of his tour, the big symbolic stop, was always the same. A brief visit to the bridge, the sacred sterile command center, to show guests the brain of the ship. Only this time, when he and his gaggle of tourists arrived at the bridge door, their key cards didn't work. The captain, citing a new security protocol directive from corporate, had personally restricted access. Marco was left standing there, red-faced, locked out of his own punchline. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive humiliation.
The message was clear. The brain was no longer taking his calls. He tried to laugh it off, of course, a little joke about overzealous security, but I could see the panic behind his eyes. He was a performer whose stage was shrinking by the hour. Later, I passed him in a narrow service corridor. The practiced smile was gone, replaced with a tight, angry line. His knuckles were white as he gripped his tablet. He barely saw me, the phantom in the machine. He had no idea where the attack was coming from, and that ignorance was a more beautiful, exquisite torture than any overt act of vengeance I could have planned. Brenda hadn't just sent an email.
She'd planted a seed of doubt right in the sterile, air-conditioned offices back in Miami. And now the corporate machine, that giant impersonal beast, was slowly beginning to turn its gaze toward its golden boy. It wasn't my revenge anymore, it was theirs. I had simply pointed it in the right direction, and I was loving the view from the engine room. It turns out that setting a man's career on fire has perks. I found a copy of a dense-looking Russian novel outside my cabin door with a bookmark in it. No note. I didn't need one. It was from Brenda, my co-conspirator, my partner in corporate sabotage. We'd created our own weird little two-person book club with a membership based on a shared appreciation for watching pompous men squirm. A quiet solidarity that was far more comforting than any therapy session. I could almost hear her dry chuckle echoing down the empty corridor. Revenge really does forge the weirdest friendships. Marco was officially spiraling. The effortless charm was gone, replaced with a jittery, caffeine-fueled paranoia. I saw him having a heated conversation on his phone near a service staircase, jabbing his finger at his screen. The cool, crisp linen shirt was now slightly rumpled. He used to smell of salt water and success. Now he just reeked of desperation. I overheard him loudly blaming the head of the entertainment division for spreading rumors. It was magnificent. The corporate beast was eating its own, and he was hacking off the wrong limbs in a panic. He was so busy looking for an enemy on his level, he never once looked down into the guts of the ship where the real problem lived. So much for being a director of guest experiences. He had zero idea what his real guest was experiencing. Total bummer for him. That night, doing my rounds, I found a frayed data cable on one of the secondary generators. An easy fix, a simple case of wear and care, but for a moment, I just looked at it. A bundle of tiny protected wires, one little thread at a time, wearing thin until the whole connection is compromised. That was Marco's career right there. One little thread, one cut corner on an ATV, and the whole thing was starting to fray. I taped it up neatly. My own systems had to remain perfect, after all. My professional pride depended on it. Then came the real plot twist. Not from the ship's command, not from Miami, but from my old life. A ping on my tablet. An official-looking calendar invite popped up on my screen. Jeff and Karen, mandatory divorce mediation session, virtual. My stomach plunged into my boots. It was scheduled for the next day. Karen, a name that had started to feel like part of a distant, unpleasant past, was suddenly clawing its way back into my present. My carefully constructed revenge plot, my clean, satisfying little war with Marco, was about to be contaminated by the original wound. I had been so focused on dismantling the accomplice that I had completely forgotten about the architect. I stared at the invite, the glowing blue button that said, accept. It felt like a detonator. What did she want? To perform her I was lonely monologue again for a mediator? To haggle over the toaster and our sad little art collection? The timing was too perfect for a coincidence. Had she spoken to Marco? Did she know what was happening to him?
Suddenly, my neat, compartmentalized world felt incredibly small. My past and present were on a collision course, set to unfold in a tiny window on my laptop screen, all while trapped on a ship in the middle of the damned ocean. This wasn't just about Marco's career anymore. The game had just acquired a second player. There is a unique type of hell reserved for discussing the implosion of your marriage over a shoddy satellite internet connection. I sat in my small, sterile cabin, staring at my battered laptop as it struggled to life. The cheap fan whirred like an asthmatic mouse. Down below my feet, I controlled tens of thousands of horsepower with precision. In this moment, I couldn't even get a stable Wi-Fi signal. A fitting metaphor, really.
On screen, the mediator appeared first, a woman named Diane with a professionally serene smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She radiated calm, the calm of someone getting paid $300 an hour to watch a car wreck in slow motion. Then Karen's face flickered into existence in a separate window, pixelated in a half-second behind her own audio. The ghost at the feast had logged in. She'd chosen her backdrop carefully, a neutral gray wall, a single, tasteful orchid in the corner. She looked tired but composed, a victim but a strong one. It was a masterclass in stagecraft. I steeled myself for the inevitable encore performance of I Was Lonely, the sob story of a woman adrift in a sea of five-star amenities. I was ready to mute my mic and just stare, letting her words splash harmlessly against the armor of my indifference. I was wrong. It's a recurring theme in my life. Jeff, she began, her voice crisp, cutting right past the mediator's gentle preamble about mutual respect. I know you're angry. Here we go, I thought, bracing myself. But then her face, even through the lag, hardened into something I hadn't seen before. Not guilt, not sadness, it was business. I'll make this simple. I don't want a thing. The apartment in Miami, the car, the savings, it's all yours. You can have a clean break. No fight. The mediator blinked, her serene smile faltering. I felt a cold dread trickle down my spine. This wasn't the script. Where were the tears, the arguments over who gets to keep the ridiculously expensive coffee machine? Then she dropped the bomb. In return, Karen said, her eyes locked on my digital representation on her screen, you will stop what you are doing. You will leave Marco Castillo alone. The whir of the laptop fan was suddenly the loudest sound in the world. My carefully constructed reality tilted on its axis. My secret war, my phantom operation, she knew. She knew. I felt the blood drain from my face. My poker face, my carefully maintained engineer's cool, it just crumbled. How could she possibly know? My beautiful, contained, elegant little plan had a spy I never accounted for. She saw the shock on my face, and for the first time a flicker of real emotion crossed hers, a grim, bitter satisfaction. I don't know how you're doing it, Jeff, and I don't care. I'm just telling you to stop. Don't email corporate, don't talk to the crew, let him have his damn promotion. If you don't, she paused, letting the threat hang in this staticky air between us, it gets messy for everyone. Before I could even process a response, she looked at the stunned mediator. That's my offer, his problem, his choice. And with a single click, her window went dark, leaving me alone with Diane's bewildered face. I'd walked into a divorce mediation. I walked out into a hostage negotiation. Karen hadn't just betrayed me. It turns out she'd been holding the leverage the entire time, and I had no idea what it was. The Zoom window was empty, but Diane, the mediator, was still talking. Something about rescheduling and open communication. I clicked end meeting so hard I nearly cracked the screen. The silence in my cabin rushed in to fill the void. For the first time, the constant low-frequency hum of the engines beneath me felt claustrophobic, the vibration of my own coffin. She knew. The words echoed in the tiny room. How in the hell did she know? My perfect, silent revenge plot, a ghost operation conducted from the shadows, suddenly had a live studio audience. My brain, the diagnostic machine, spun into overdrive, frantically searching for the leak, the breach, the catastrophic point of failure. Marco wouldn't have told her. He was the one in the dark, flailing around, blaming the wrong people. That was the whole point. Brenda? Impossible. She was a goddamn tactical nuke in a cardigan. Her loyalty, born of pure spite, felt more solid than anything in my marriage. So how? I started pacing the shoebox-sized cabin, the cheap industrial carpet worn into a path by 100 other restless engineers before me. I thought about our digital life. We had shared everything: streaming accounts, an Amazon Prime password, a family cloud for vacation photos that now looked like a crime scene album. Had I missed a backdoor? Some old spyware she'd installed on my laptop years ago? It felt too movie villain, too complicated for Karen. She wasn't a hacker, she was an opportunist. She found existing loopholes, she didn't build new ones. My eyes fell on my laptop, the source of the humiliation. The little black dot of the camera felt like a judgment. I'd used this machine to dismantle a man's life, and now it felt like the murder weapon that had my fingerprints all over it. I scrolled back through my digital history, through the week that was now a black, greasy smudge in my memory. That first week of pure, unadulterated depression. And then I saw it. The calendar entry from a month ago. Zoom therapy session. Karen had arranged it. She found the therapist for me. She has amazing reviews, Jeff. It'll help you process. My blood turned to ice. It was such a gesture of concern, a calculated, caring move. I had seen it as an olive branch. Shoot, it was a listening device. My fingers flew across the keyboard, my heart hammering against my ribs. I pulled up the website for the telehealth service. It was a slick, modern interface full of calming stock photos of people smiling at sunsets. It looked professional. I dug into the user agreement, the fine print everyone scrolls past, and there it was, under the family and couples plan she had so thoughtfully purchased for us. For record-keeping and quality assurance, session recordings may be accessible via the primary account holder's dashboard. I was the secondary user. She was the primary account holder. I didn't need to be bugged. I didn't need to be hacked. I had sat in this very chair, looked into my own laptop camera, and delivered a 1-hour monologue to a well-meaning therapist outlining every ounce of my anger, my hurt, and the cold, budding desire for payback. I hadn't just given Karen a key to my apartment, I'd given her a key to my brain. A wave of pure, white-hot fury washed over me. So intense, it was almost serene. I wasn't just goofed, I'd been played from the very start. She hadn't reacted to my revenge plot, she'd anticipated it. But then, as the rage subsided, it was replaced by that familiar, cold clarity. She thinks she's watching me. She thinks she has the all-access pass. It's the ultimate vanity of the manipulator, believing they are the only one with a secret. An audience, I thought with a grim smile, can be misled. A camera can be lied to. If she wants to tune in for the Jeff Show, fine. I'm about to change the script. My next therapy session was a work of art, a masterpiece of controlled demolition. I logged on, face drawn, shoulders slumped. I let the ship's faint vibrations and the low whir of the cabin ventilation provide the soundtrack for my broken man monologue. For the listening ear of Karen, my secret audience, I painted a portrait of defeat.
I told the therapist, a woman now reduced to an unwitting prop in my private play, that Karen was right, that the anger was consuming me, that it was a pointless fight. I confessed I was exhausted. What good is revenge, I asked, my voice cracking just so, if you burn your own life down for the fuel? It was a great line. I almost believed it myself. I told her I was going to let it go, for my own good, for my sanity. I just wanted it to be over. While I performed the role of a chastened, heartbroken husband for the camera, the engineer in me was back at work in the cold, hard world of data. The fury from my discovery had solidified into a single, diamond-hard question. Why was Karen protecting Marco? It wasn't love. Love doesn't come with blackmail terms and conditions. This was a business transaction. So I started digging, not into Marco, but into the quiet, unassuming financial life of my estranged wife. Using our old shared cloud drive, I sifted through the digital debris of our marriage, bank statements, tax documents, the forgotten relics of a life built on trust. It felt profane, like excavating a grave. I looked at the ship's wake from a service porthole, a long, churning trail of white on the dark water. You can't erase where you've been, especially when you've left a paper trail. And then I found it, the needle in a haystack of domestic finances. 4 months ago, Karen had registered a new LLC in Florida, Seabreeze Marketing and Solutions. It sounded so bland, so corporate, so utterly generic. A digital ghost. On its own, it meant nothing. But then I cross-referenced the dates with the documents I still had on the memory stick. I pulled up Marco's excursion budgets again. The funds he'd siphoned away from ATV maintenance hadn't just vanished. They had been paid out as vendor fees for on-site promotional consulting. The payments, every single one, went to Seabreeze Marketing and Solutions. It was never an affair. It was an inside job. Karen and Marco weren't lovers, they were business partners. He got a promotion by juicing his numbers, and she got paid as the phantom consultant who helped him do it. A week later, we were back in our final mediation. Diane, the mediator, smiled her calm, professional smile. Karen looked relieved, convinced her threat had worked. She thought she'd won. "I'm prepared to accept Karen's original offer," I said, my voice flat and even. "She keeps nothing, I get a clean break." Karen's shoulders relaxed. Victory. She nodded at Diane. But I held up a finger. "On one condition," I added. "The financial disclosure will reflect our assets as of 6 months ago, before my wife's entrepreneurial spirit truly blossomed." Silence. I watched her face on the screen. The pixelated mask of relief dissolved, replaced by the sheer, bloodless panic of discovery. I never mentioned the company. I never mentioned Marco. I never mentioned the ATVs. I just laid the unexploded bomb on the table between us. I knew. Her checkmate was a fool's mate. My clean break meant her criminal conspiracy with Marco remained undocumented in our divorce, their secret safe from legal discovery. And her problem, not mine. What she and Marco did now was their business. She looked at me, a stranger on a screen, and nodded, slowly. The ghost in the machine had won. After the call ended, I walked to the upper deck. The engines rumbled below me, a steady, powerful, predictable rhythm. It was the only rhythm I needed. I was finally free.